much of your journey was shaped by your heritage?
When you're Egyptian Chinese, you learn pretty quickly that you're not exactly the typical mold.
That background really shaped my culinary palate.
I generally think that women cook out of love and men cook out of ego.
Taiwanese food is its own cuisine, and it's not a subset of Chinese cuisine.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Divya Gopalan. So, as the saying goes, we are what we eat, and it seems both physically and culturally. Now, despite the importance of food in our lives, its significance is not really taught in schools, but usually picked up at home by watching parents or grandparents feed their families. What we eat growing up becomes part of our essence. And these personal journeys of self-discovery is what's on the menu today. And treating us to an inspiring feast and food memories now, I just have to say a huge shout out to my producers for all the food puns, Fred and Tomasz. But we now welcome journalist, TV host and writer Clarissa Wei joining us from Taipei. And speaking to us from the island of Koh Samui in Thailand, we have chef, restaurateur, writer and a judge on Top Chef Middle East, Bobby Chinn. Now, what you put on the table defines not only what your communication to who you put on that table to, but also says a little bit something about yourself. So I want to talk about who you are and what you guys bring to the table. Bobby, your first professional job was working on Wall Street. It was a windy road. You eventually became a chef in Asia and then used your skills in the Middle East. How much of your journey was shaped by your heritage?
Well, I think that when you're Egyptian Chinese, born in New Zealand, educated between San Francisco, Cairo, and London, you learn pretty quickly that you're not exactly the typical mold. And so, like when people talk of their childhood memories through food, mine ranges from Shanghainese cuisine in Hawaii from my Chinese grandmother, Middle Eastern cuisine from my Egyptian grandmother. And because my mother and father were both foodies, I used to eat, and coming from San Francisco, my exposure to food was quite wide and varied. So my comfort food is everything from falafel and fool to pho to Indian cuisine, because the food in England in those days were absolutely horrific. So all of that was what definitely influenced me, because I was very open to everything.
Now, Clarissa, you're Taiwanese American. You've spent and now spending a lot of time here in Taiwan. But how much would you say your background has inspired you as a food journalist and an author?
Oh, completely. I mean, my cultural background isn't as rich as Bobby's, but I grew up in Los Angeles, in the San Gabriel Valley, where we have a fantastic diversity of Chinese food, Taiwanese food, but also a lot of Mexican food. And also we have Vietnamese and Thai food. So that background really shaped my culinary palate. But because I am a food writer that specializes now in Taiwanese cuisine and sometimes Chinese cuisine, I think growing up in a predominantly Asian place really helped.
Now, Bobby, you know, as mentioned, yours was a very long road to get to where you are right now. But why did it take so long for you to really delve into your Middle Eastern roots? So you seem to have taken a lot of paths and looked at different parts of your influences and heritage before you got here.
Well, I generally think that women cook out of love and men cook out of ego. And so as a chef or working towards becoming a chef in San Francisco, you really wanted to learn a French technique. And that is all about, you know, all this wide variety of techniques and skill sets that you need to know. And it was like the United States was going into that direction. At least California cuisine was basically regional French cuisine that was now coming into play, that we could use our own ingredients, local ingredients. And so I was very, very much interested in that. But going to Vietnam changed all that. You know, when you talk to a great chef, they'll always talk to you about the contrast of textures, flavors, colors, hot, cold, sweet, sour. And the Vietnamese were doing that in their pajamas. Just one dish, just incredibly well. And then this also led me into my whole Asian roots, where I started looking at Chinese technique and ideas that they were doing thousands of years ago. And so I was more geared to that because I was living there. I always found that Egyptian or Middle Eastern food was more rustic in its preparation and simplistic. And so I just found comfort in it. I'd never really wanted to convert a dish that has lasted thousands of years and try and make it my own. I didn't see the point of that because I found those dishes very comforting. And so when all of a sudden the opportunity arose for me to do Top Chef Middle East, all of a sudden I'm going to be judging a lot of people across North Africa and the Middle East, and I really needed to know much more about the cuisine, like really kind of like read into it much more than I'd taken in the past. I took it a hell of a lot more seriously because how can I judge or understand the cuisine if I don't know the originals? So that really kind of like drove me into understanding the cuisine a hell of a lot more than I did throughout my life. And I think that's one of the things with food is that you never stop learning, and there's always a new ingredient, there's always a new kitchen tool, there's always a new or understanding of an old technique.
Right, and speaking of the new and the old, Clarissa, you say your family hasn't really played a role in your food journey, particularly in your writing. But you do have a chapter in your book about your grandma. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so my cookbook is very much a compilation of different people in Taiwan and chefs, food writers, friends, and occasionally some family members who contributed recipes. And I guess the only family member of mine who contributed a recipe was my grandma, who passed away while I was writing the book. And she taught me how to make zongzi, which is a Chinese style. Some people call it a tamale, if you will, but it's a sort of triangular bundle of sticky rice, and it's wrapped in bamboo leaves. So my grandma taught me how to make that. And I'm so glad I got the recipe from her because, again, a couple months after we shot the photos and I got the recipe, she passed away. So it really taught me the importance of writing some of these techniques down and getting the flavor profiles right and really preserving these stories before it's too late.
So eating and what you put on the table can help bring communities together, as seen in this next video. Chef Tony Tung from the US-based restaurant Good to Eat Dumplings tells us how she and her customers communicate using the language of food.
是他们吃到这些东西，即使不是台湾人，他们都会觉得吃到好像回家吃到了那个家乡的味道。那个是很表示这个里面的食物的灵魂，你吃到了。我的名字叫 Tony， 就是中文名字叫 Tony。去年来的时候，我其实不会说英文。那不会说英文最大的问题就是，那你就交不到朋友。所以我就是透过主食煮东西。那煮东西其实很快的，你可以看到别人的脸，知不知道他喜不喜欢，然后去秀我的热情。比较感动的是，大部分来的都是年轻人，当他们吃了之后，他们会带他们的父母来吃。那当带父母来吃，其实我是很兴奋，我也很紧张的，因为我也很希望可以让他们吃到我的食物的时候，回到在台湾的感受。常常真的有70、80岁的老阿公老阿嬷来吃到，他们只会讲台语，很多人吃到哭，然后他们会开始跟我说他们在台湾的故事，食物如何跟把人的那个情感变成我们没有距离。虽然你是第一次来我的餐厅吃饭，那个感动，你就会发现自己在做的事情好有意义哦，而不是只是在这里煮饭。
Bobby, Tony speaks about that closing that distance through food. You say you've always been an outsider due to your unusual heritage. How much do you feel that food has brought you or given you some kind of inclusion in the different communities you lived in?
Colossal. I mean, you know, I went to international schools, so I ate cuisines at an early age. Nigerian cuisine, Indian, I said, was comfort, and I was very open to all of it. And so when you don't fit in the holes, you kind of like you gotta like be outside of the box, you know, it's by default. And so I was very open to everything and anything. Also, my Chinese heritage, is like, as they say, the only thing a Chinese person doesn't eat with wings is an airplane. The only thing we don't eat with legs is a chair. And I basically did that. And I was very open to anything and everything because I think food brings people together. I'm a vegetarian. I'm a vegan wannabe, but I'm a flexitarian because of the line of work that I do, that when people ask me to eat something, I have to eat it. It's my profession, but I generally don't want to, due to the fact that 33% of greenhouse gases are related to our food system. But generally speaking, I'm very open to anything and everything. I've eaten everything from bamboo rat to scorpions to tarantulas, because that's what's offered, So yeah, I'm very, very open, I guess.
Another point I want to pick up on from that video was about the changing perceptions through generations. And Clarissa, you've said that the message in your book and the discourse around it has particularly appealed to the younger generation. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, the messaging around my book is that Taiwanese food is its own cuisine and it's not a subset of Chinese cuisine. And I think that's a sign of the times. This wasn't necessarily the case, 10, 15 years ago, but because of, movements like the sunflower movement, because of increasing tensions in China, there is this very strong idea that our cuisine is our own and it belongs to us here in Taiwan. And that's something that more people on the younger side share, but older folks like, my parents and grandparents who grew up during martial law, who grew up during the different colonial eras of Taiwan. My grandmother was born under the Japanese rule. They don't necessarily see Taiwanese cuisine as its own entity because they weren't told that or taught to conceptualize that when they were younger.
So, Bobby, do you feel that the younger generation are more open to different cuisines? And what role do you think like the internet, YouTube shows, MasterChef, Top Chef, shows like that have played in opening people's minds to different kinds of food?
Well, yeah, I think like definitely in the Middle East, we're seeing changes because we're seeing the profile of a chef changing. In the old days, it was like you're an uneducated, you couldn't get a job anywhere else, so you end up you work in a kitchen. The stereotypification of a chef in Asia years ago would have been like, you're a gambling gangster, card player, That's all changed. And I think television's changed a lot of that. We've had a lot of prestige to the profession. You wear a white jacket, have a Rydell glass in your hand with a nice bottle of wine and beautiful flowers and beautiful restaurants, and all of a sudden the image has changed of the chef, and now we don't look at it as some subservient job anymore. It's a profession that we get to use all of our senses. We're connected to the environment and sustainability. We're the end user of food, and it's become much more prestigious. And then on top of that, like from San Francisco, we have just, I think, the most incredible cuisine global cuisine at $35, below $35 a head. I mean, everything from Mexican, Japanese, Taiwanese. Even when we talk about Chinese food, we don't say just Chinese food in San Francisco. We want to have Szechuanese food. We're going to have Taiwanese food, Cantonese food. I mean, there is an education now that people understand there is a difference. And I think that this younger generation is privileged because we didn't have that when we were kids. Like Japanese food was baked, raw fish. I don't think so. Now all of a sudden that's changed. So yeah, it's and that's a global thing. I mean, look at how well sushi and Japanese food has traveled just because the idea that it was fresh and it's clean and it's tasty. That's totally new. And I think we're going to continue to see like hip cuisines and hip ingredients, and these youngsters are, I think, kind of like leading the way because they're, everyone's thinking Gen Z and what they want. They want everything and they want it now.
Right. So correct me if I'm wrong, but one of your specialties or what you focused on was fusion. Is that right, Bobby? Yeah,
it was kind of like the idea that to make the original was really tough. So you have to understand the original, then you can deviate from it. And so, there are certain dishes that I crossed, like for example, the rice pudding that I make was a cross between an Egyptian rice pudding, but without using milk, but using coconut, and the Thai sticky mango sticky rice. So, but the sticky rice was hard for me to do. So I made it more like a risotto, folding in the coconut, and then adding the nuts and the sultanas, and then a black sesame sauce with coconut milk, and then it becomes a completely different dish. But the inspiration was coming from Egypt and Thailand. So I do that, but it has to have kind of respect from the original, so that even the Thai people would like that. It's like there's no mango in this dish, So the fusion or the dishes that I create that lack, I guess, the idea of tradition is very, very open, and I try and do that that makes sense. So it takes me years sometimes. Sometimes it's really simple. Sometimes it's an evolution, but that's generally what I do. I can make the original. I try to make the original, and then from there, I can deviate.
Right, so speaking of deviation and fusion, this next video is actually for you, Clarissa. Have a look at this. Trig Brown, along with his partner Josh, operates Winson, a Taiwanese-American restaurant in Brooklyn, New York. There are endless numbers of fried chicken recipes spanning the globe, but here's Trig's take on the Taiwanese fusion of a Southern classic.
I really wanted to do fried chicken sandwich, and I'd always done fried chicken for family meal at restaurants in the past. I'm from the South. I love fried chicken. Taiwan has its own unique version of fried chicken. And I remember being like, Josh, I want to do this fried chicken sandwich. Like, what kind of bread would you like to see it on? And he was like, I grew up loving boa bao, and after church we'd have fried chicken sandwiches on boa bao, and I was like, let's do it. Done. Yeah, let's go. Like, that's the perfect idea. And so, fried chicken was something deeply personal to me, and to be able to kind of run it through this Taiwanese lens, and it was like a research project.
So what do you think of that, Clarissa? And bring it also back to your journey with your book about trying to remain authentic. How do you feel about bola bao fried chicken? And what's it taken to make your recipes authentic?
I think what he's doing is awesome, because Taiwanese fried chicken was actually inspired by American fried chicken. And this happened in the 80s when there was a huge love of the 70s. It started in the 60s, 70s, and really crescendoed in the 80s. And there's this huge love for American culture in Taiwan, because America was giving Taiwan billions of dollars in economic aid, but also flooding our coffers with wheat and soybeans. And so we had dishes like fried chicken, we had the big sausage, little sausage and big sausage, which looks like a hot dog. We also have dishes like the night market steak with spaghetti, and those dishes are very much inspired by America. So to see an American chef like Trig that works for a Taiwanese restaurant, taking Taiwanese fried chicken and adding his own spin on it, it's a very natural evolution. And I tend to stay away from that word authenticity, because I think it's a very loaded word that has a lot of, potential gatekeeping involved. And it's kind of like a bomb if you use it too much, and that there is no such thing as authenticity. It's very personal to that person, and it's a moving target that changes over time. So it's really fitting that Trig is putting his own spin, because that's how Taiwanese fried chicken even evolved.
And Bobby, perhaps I can get you to jump in on the whole idea of authenticity, staying with what was meant to be, or perhaps started off as the original recipes, original way of doing things, and then the evolution. Like, how much is food evolving, and how much should we really stick to this whole idea of authenticity when it comes to cuisine?
Well, I think we should preserve those recipes exactly, what a lot of chefs are doing. I mean, this is the whole slow food movement, is to protect, the original recipes is very, very important. And I think that we are in a creative art, the culinary arts, and we can go in many different directions. I mean, there's this whole idea of molecular, like I'm going to reinterpret my cuisine and put it into a little piece of caviar. In one bite, I can describe my entire culture, from, like, say, for Anadra, this is molecular, a spherical of olives. And we can go down that route. We can also go and play with the ingredients, which like my grandmother, my Chinese grandmother, she was making a type of Chinese cuisine I've never tasted before. And Chinese people from all over would sit there, my God, that's the most incredible cuisine we've had. And I was like, well, how do you make it? What inspired you these dishes? She didn't have the original recipes when she was in America. They didn't have Shaoxing wine at the beginning. She used gin. She was finding all these substitutes. She was doing techniques. So all of that is part of the natural process of the creative culinary arts, to constantly evolve, to constantly push the boundaries. And it's which boundaries you wish to push. Is it for flavor, texture, color? We can have people like Dan Barber that's, bringing us back to the roots, and we got to grow it in a certain way to get part flavor and nutrients. And then there's this molecular, and there's sustainability. I mean, we're all going all over the map. So there's many different roads to take. It's just what road suits you and what is your ethos.
Right. So Clarissa, if you had to go with your takeaway from your book, and particularly kind of the evolution of Taiwanese food, what would that be? What would the one thing that you would say kind of defined your journey that, speaks of Taiwanese food?
That it's constantly evolving with every different wave of governance that we have. We've had a tidal wave of completely new dishes. And so Taiwanese food is really a combination of all of that. I think in the outside world, when they look at Taiwan, there's only a couple of dishes that come up, right? It's the stereotypical beef noodle soup, bubble tea. Maybe they think soup dumplings come from Taiwan. They don't. But our cuisine is so much broader than that. And because we are a nation mostly made out of immigrants, with the exception of the indigenous people here, our food is ultimately a type of fusion, even though there are dishes that have now been here for over 200 years old. So this idea of what traditional Taiwanese cuisine is, we have old dishes, but it's constantly evolving, and I think that's a great thing.
And when you take it to ancient cultures like Egypt and other countries which have had thousands of years of heritage, do you feel like events like that, political events, or maybe just changes in governance affect the food type, Bobby? Or do you feel like Taiwan is quite a special case, as it constantly has this existential threat to it also?
Well, I don't know. I'm not scared of the existential threat. Look, I mean, I was in Taiwan, and when I was, we were filming in Taiwan, and I was like, well, what do you eat in Taiwan? And the idea was, the beef noodle soup and the stinky tofu. All of a sudden you go there and you just find just a wide spectrum of food that is ridiculous. People don't even know it. It just falls into the category of Chinese. And I think that as our profession continues to evolve, and if you look at the top baker, I think is Korean, and one of the top croissant makers is Taiwanese. I mean, we're going to have this constant evolution. It's not going to stop, because that's that's our profession. That is literally part of the job description. If you're going to be a chef, is I going to continue doing a menu that's written in slate, or you're going to constantly push the boundaries? And I think chefs are constantly wanting to push the boundaries.
Right, and so this brings me towards the end of our show. And before we go, we want to show you one more example of bonding through food. Connected's very own filmmaker, Su-Yin Lin, brings us this story on young people searching for flavors and learning from older generations. Have a look.
Hi， 胡阿姨，好久不见。那时候还没有疫情，好像有四年吗？对啊，我就觉得很久了。我是岛屿上的饭桌的发起人以宁，这个名字主要是因为我们最初一开始的时候，我们的计划是想要可以采访全台湾各地，然后各个族群的长辈的手路菜以及他们的故事。然后我们就觉得说，饭桌它是一个很特殊，然后有凝聚人心，然后可以让大家在上面就是交流的一个场域。那这些食物是怎么来？然后呢，得到这些食材人他们怎么料理，都是非常吸引我的。 哦，真的哦，所以本来就有时候没有做那么精致，都是整碗。
团队的人也都就是跟我有类似的经验，就我们都是吃可能阿公阿嬷或者是外公外婆的菜长大这样。我觉得我们就真的会开始觉得，有一些东西不去记录下来，就是真的很可惜。我们就想要趁着就是他们还有力气的这个时候，去记录下一些他们的身影，以及这些故事跟食谱。
酸豆角，这胡阿姨自己腌自己做的。胡阿姨到底有什么不能做的？这个要拿出来。
做菜吗？不会，因为上面有2个哥哥2个姐姐，就排行老5，不太会做菜。做菜都是嫁了建村才学的。
对，你有说你一开始嫁过来的时候都吃不饱，因为你很想要吃。
对呀，因为我们客家人面食是当点心。
对。我是从苗栗嫁来这边，我是民国60年考进铁路局，这莒光号小姐。就是跟着车子莒光号跑高雄、台北这样跑，然后在车上认识我的先生。所以，民国64年就嫁来这个建国一村。婆婆在上班做菜，她就叫我说什么菜要怎么切，她回来再开始炒。炒的时候就叫我在后面看了就要炒菜的顺序要放什么佐料，然后我就把它写起来做笔记。后来发现在做菜能够让我忘记很多事情，然后我就买菜啊、买材料啊做给大家吃，这样就会把那不愉快的事情给忘掉，这样子。然后我要把客家菜带进来外省菜，这样子。像梅干菜、肉丸子，就是我们从小吃的那个客家菜。
还好，这个也是煮好了有汤汁的。
这感觉好好吃。
后来就是也是开始做这个计划之后，就有就是在跟可能阿姨学啊，然后有时候自己也会下厨。
这个可以拿掉。
然后只是直到就是某一个时刻，我突然意识到，这些东西其实都跟他有关哦，就又会觉得他好像还在。
Well, you can watch this and other features from our contributors on our website and YouTube channels. And with that, it's time to clean up the table and start washing the dishes. As we've arrived to the end of this episode, I have to thank my foodie producers, Tomasz and Fred, for all those foodie puns. But a huge thank you to both my guests, Clarissa Wei in Taipei, Bobby Chinn in Thailand. Thank you very much. And to our audience at home, it's been great to have your company. Goodbye and always stay connected.